Time delay around there. Hello, good evening. We welcome you to this live session of the Introduction to Research course. I am Professor Prathap, Haridoss, and Prof.Abhijit Deshpande is also here. We will be happy to look at what questions you have and also answer as many as we can. I hope you're enjoying the course. I know this course is meant for people with a wide range of backgrounds. And therefore, I think even based on whatever I saw in the discussion forum questions and comments, every class is not going to address every student. So you need not be worried if one or two classes or a particular week's content is not really in line with what you're comfortable with. This is primarily intended at a wider audience, therefore it is made that way. Even with respect to any marks you're looking for, things like that, we're anyway going to take best 6 out of 8 assignments. And so if there are 1 or 2 topics that are difficult for you, I don't think that's going to impact you in a very significant manner. The same will be true for your final exam also. It will have questions from a range of topics. So you're not going to have any impossible situation as you write your examination. And so that is fine. So I think by and large, as I could see from the interactions, most comments and concerns that people have raised through the forum have been addressed. Maybe 1 or 2 people were not fully satisfied, but I guess that's the nature of the interaction. So don't worry about it. Just take the course as it comes along. There was also a query about what comes in the end, which is related to all the different disciplines that we have listed there. And that is just an interview with the faculty from each of those disciplines. And you are free to see, you are not restricted to seeing your own discipline interview. You can see all other interviews also, just to get an idea of what other people have, what ideas other people have, and what issues they face, etc. And that's just general information. We're not going to ask you any questions saying, in mechanical engineering, what did the professor say, etc. That's not the idea there. It's for you to just get a general overview of what things are. We also have a group discussion with students in the end, where again, these are graduate students like yourselves who have their own comments and queries, and they are from different backgrounds, different number of years they have spent in their graduate school, in their postgraduate studies. And so they have some points that they make, and all of those are sort of discussed in that. So again, that's also general. So those are the general comments I had to start with. Maybe Professor Abhijit would also add something, and then
yeah. So as you are taking this course on Introduction to Research, one of the main things that you have to try to learn during this course is the methods that are followed in research. And during this live session also, we will try to answer those questions which are generic and which are related to more general issues related to research and more generic issues related to research. For example, what is a hot area in this branch of engineering is too specific a question for us to address during this period. So we would request you to keep some of our interaction to fundamental issues involved in research, what are the doubts you have about methods of research, so that we can have a meaningful discussion which is sort of useful to all of us. So with that, maybe we can start off with the first question that was there is, what is the difference between an MTech and PhD? And so generally, MTech is a more course-based program. It's a master's program where the idea is that you have done some courses during undergraduate, but you would like to learn more on some of those subjects in more depth. So therefore, you do more number of courses. But given that you are doing post-graduation, you also do a project. But the project is also time-bound. So therefore, your learning during masters is more deeper learning in subjects of your choice, and also an idea how to do a project. While PhD is not time-bound, and also it's research on a topic where some novel contribution is expected from you. Emphasis on coursework is only so that you learn the fundamentals and you can apply them during your research. So therefore, MTech and PhD are very different in terms of what is expected to research.
Yeah, and so there's another comment here from Naveen. So after PhD, is there any option other than teaching? If yes, what types of jobs can I expect? So yes, so when you do a PhD, you become a specialist of some sort in your area, and therefore you have to look for jobs where they're looking for specialization in that area. I mean, typically you have to look for, if you're looking for an industry job. Teaching job is no more academic, and you can, therefore you go to a college and you start teaching. And if you're looking for industry jobs, you look for industries where they're doing research and development with respect to a product that is related to your area of research. What I will say is that after PhD, even though even today it's generally the case that even if you just do a BTech, you will get a job. But if you're looking for increasingly, they want to know what is it that you're good at. Even at a bachelor's level, they will ask you, in the courses that you took, which course did you do well in? They'll ask you some questions related to that and see if they are interested in that, that kind of knowledge and that kind of expertise. Increasingly, it is necessary. In fact, I would say today it is the norm that you should know how to sell yourself. You should be able to say that I am an expert in this area, and my expertise is useful to you. So that responsibility now lies on you. So you cannot simply, I think it's no longer the case that you can simply look at an advertisement and immediately tick a few boxes and say, therefore I match or therefore I don't match. So this is not the way in which you should approach getting a position somewhere. It is very useful for you to try and sell yourself in the sense that you should do some background study of that company, of the kind of position they are offering from that company. Maybe if you know somebody in the company, you can get some little bit more explanation, and then look at your background and see what aspects of your background align with that. So, for example, you may be a material science PhD, but maybe the company that is trying to employ you or putting the advertisement is actually looking for a materials characterization person. So you may have worked on some, say, I don't know, creep of some material, or you looked at some nanomaterial or some such thing you've done, which is very specific. Maybe you looked at a battery material, some material which is used for a battery. So it is not necessary that henceforth you can only work on battery materials. That is not the idea here by saying that you are an expert. Many times it may be that is the best job fit that will be there. But you can easily work in any company which works on any energy related material. You can work with any company that works with, say, electron microscopy, which is a technique you might have used during your PhD, and so on. So if you did some modeling work, so that modeling analysis that you have done, technical modeling that you have done, then you can look for any position that is looking for some theoretical modeling of that of some area, and then you can utilize your skills there. So that is the way you should approach it. And so there are a lot of positions, but you have to search for them. You cannot just like that look for a generic advertisement and expect that you will directly fit.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to add with respect to job opportunities is also these days there is some emphasis on students trying to start off something on their own also. So depending on the project that you work in and depending on the area that you have, the research experience that you gain during your PhD can be useful in terms of how to deal with new technology and how to start off an initiative based on new technologies. So there are some students who are doing master's or PhD research and then start up something on their own. So therefore, once you do PhD, each of these opportunity is available to you, either teaching, academic. There are also many governmental research institutions, and then there is industry, and then there is something on your own also.
Okay, so we have, I think Preeti has a question on PhD is not time bound, but in our university they have given only 3 years to complete a PhD. So I think that's a valid question to ask. So I think different institutes are trying to, what shall I say, balance different requirements that are there based on, say, there is an academic requirement, there is also an administrative requirement, and maybe there's a financial implication. So I think they're balancing all this. So it is difficult to actually say that, yes, it's true that it's difficult to say that you should finish your PhD in 3 years. Many institutes, for example, even in IIT Madras, when we have external candidates come or who come under QIP program, called Quality Improvement Program, where faculty come from other colleges and do PhD here, they get only 3 years here. The expectation is that at least a bulk of their work they will do in those 3 years. They may take a little longer to finish their PhD, but officially they will get, sort of funded or get access to our facilities or some such thing will be there for that 3-year period. So you should think of it that way. I mean, it would be nice to, there's no need to, I also would say there's no specific need for you to drag your PhD into 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or any such thing. In principle, you could potentially even do it in 3 years if things work out correctly for you. So that is the idea here, that there is some time-bound thing there to give you some sense of.
Yeah. Also, in such cases, when there are administrative requirements to or financial ways to say that you should do PhD in 3 years, I think what the expectation is that you do bulk of your work, especially if it's experimental project, then you finish off large number of experiments so that mainly analysis can be done later. If it's simulation kind of a project, then the code development and everything can be finished, and then maybe just trying to get the final set of results, some of that can be done. So the idea is that in that 3 years, you devote a lot of your time in a very systematic manner so that you get most of your work done. And then once you join back the job, it may be possible to still finish, even though maybe in 3 years itself, you may not be able to finish. So I think you need to prioritize and you need to pace your research activities very well whenever such requirements of time-bounded nature comes into play during a PhD.
Chirag has a question on plagiarism. So I think that's a good point to touch upon. Increasingly, so especially, I think within India, with the background of many students in Indian context, we sometimes don't understand what plagiarism is. I think it will be touched upon in some of the classes that you will see as part of this course. I think 1 week we have some of our classes deal with ethics. So in that you will see it. So right through school, we have a tendency to cut and paste from the internet, and it's very easy these days to cut and paste. In olden days, you had to go to the library with a notebook and a pen and copy things from different textbooks. If you wanted to make a presentation, you would copy many things from various books. Then maybe you would probably handwrite with a sketch pen or something on a piece of chart. And so a lot of you had to physically do many things that forced you to rewrite many things in your own words, because you may not want to write paragraph after paragraph that is there in the internet. Today it's not like that. You simply have to like right click, drag, cut, copy, and then paste, and then you're all set with the same color. Some minor modification you can do. So without realizing it, in the past we were not really directly copying things from sources that were available to us. We were modifying and stating in our own words. Today, without realizing it, we are just copying straight from the internet. We are just copying. So this idea that you cut and paste several lines word to word, verbatim, as it's called, word to word, exactly what is there in one paper, you start putting in your document, is called plagiarism. It's basically copying in this sense. So that is wrong. That is considered wrong enough that they will withdraw the paper, they will take action against it, etc. Which is serious stuff, which many people don't seem to understand. Because that is how they have written reports all along. So, but when you do literature survey, you are talking about some other paper. So you have to balance that. You have to talk about the other paper without copying their exact words. So you read something in that paper, you have to rewrite it in your own words and say that it is from that paper. So that is that thing that you have to do. If you do it correctly, then that is not plagiarism. If you simply cut and paste whatever they have said in 2 paragraphs of their thing or several lines of their thing, that is plagiarism. So today there is software which will go through your document and compare your document with all the documents that are out there and tell what percentage of your document is a copy. And invariably, you will never be able to write a document which comes up with a 0% copy. So I think today the sort of the tolerable limit is about 15%, 1/5. So if you are at the end of that result, it's called a plagiarism check. Your percentage, it will highlight all the lines that are matching. Okay, and if that
generally it's actually 4-5 words in a row. Rarely one full. Even if you don't have full sentences there, many times. For example, it can be a sentence like this. It is very important to simulate, right? So these are 4 words, and they may be there in many papers. It is important to simulate. So then it will say that this sentence is common from many other papers also. So that's why 15% matching with other papers is acceptable, because many of these phrases are common to several types of documents.
Yeah, so 15% is the current sort of accepted guideline. And if at the end of that analysis, your paper shows less than 15% overlap, then you're considered okay. So that's the guideline.
The other thing you should remember about this plagiarism is the fact that when, let's say, I am writing my thesis or I am writing my paper, introduction is mine, right? I have to say, why is this topic important? I have to say, why is it motivated? If I now take introduction from some other work, that's not fair, because it's my thesis, it's my paper. Then introduction and motivation should also be mine. If somebody else's introduction is valid for me, then maybe I am doing something wrong. I am not doing original research. So therefore, then I can just copy the whole 2 paragraphs and paste it into mine. So that's not considered from the point of view of a PhD, that you are your own original thinker. Then you should be able to write your own introduction and motivation.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Lalita Randeep. On if we do NPTEL 4 or 5 certifications on research area, can we get an opportunity to get admission in any IIT? So I mean, okay, to answer your question, the courses that you do on NPTEL don't directly get you an admission into an IIT, but generally, increasingly, what is happening is when you come for interviews, many times faculty ask you, have you done a course on NPTEL, etc. And they are, if you have done well, it usually means you're actually quite competent in that area. You have actually learned a reasonable amount of things in that area. So when they question you in the interview about what you have learned, you are in a better position to answer their questions. And therefore, you are able to make a better impression. So I find increasingly many of our departments in IIT Madras at least ask you that, have you done a course on NPTEL? If so, which course? And then based on that answer, they have an estimate of maybe what you know and what you don't know. So it's not a direct admission. You don't directly get something from an admission from that. But chances are you are likely to better impress your committee.
Yeah, one of the questions was related to how do I start reading a paper? It seems to be very difficult to read. And I think there is many strategies are there, but one of the important things that you have to remember is when we pick up a paper, it's very unlikely that we will understand all of it. So generally, at least I follow a strategy where I read parts of it. For example, I try to read introduction. I also try to read the conclusion. Then I try to look at the graphs and see if some of those quantities that are mentioned in graphs, do I know that? Then some other time I'll go and look at the experimental method or the modeling equations and see whether it makes any sense. Then more often than not, I have to go to another source, another book or something to read little bit more fundamental knowledge about that particular paper. And then again, I come back to this paper. So when we read a paper, it is almost never just reading the paper by itself. We always have to go back to some other references, other books, and we also have to do it repeatedly. Reading it at first shot will almost never be good enough for us to understand the paper. So we read in parts, then go back and read. So generally, reading a paper will require multiple reading sessions for us to really comprehend what is there. As you become more and more expert, I think what happens is you become good at spotting the most important things from a paper. So therefore, you can sort of feel comfortable with what's written in a paper much more quickly. But if you really want to understand the details of the paper, again, it takes multiple readings. So you should never expect that you will be able to read the paper the first or 2 times or 3 times. It may take more than 5-6 times.
Okay, and we have a question here from Rahul Suresh Kumar. It says that a good researcher should also be a good engineer, and vice versa. Why aren't there a course tailored for students like that? So I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but let me answer what seems to be appropriate in that context. If you're doing experimental work, it does help to be. I mean, so there is no rule that you have to be a good engineer to be a good researcher. Engineering is usually doing something which is making a product, or something with real life, immediate real life implications. There's a product involved, or there's some some gadget that is being improved, some such thing. So there's something physical, tangible associated with engineering usually. Research, on the other hand, you may be doing some calculations, some new materials, some theoretical works. You may be doing some experimental work, some analysis of something. Things like that tend to fall in the research realm. There is no hard and fast rule that says that you have to be good at both. And there is an overlap between them also. It is not like there's a clean line saying that up to this is engineering, beyond this is research activity. Generally, if you're dealing with something new, then that is research. So usually, let's say you're building a bridge, right? So you will not be building an experimental bridge. A bridge that you're putting on the, let's say you're connecting, you're putting a bridge over a small, a small river that is flowing. So you're connecting two sides by putting a bridge. That will never be an experimental bridge. That's a tried and tested type of bridge where you know exactly what those materials are. You know what stainless steel you're going to use for what kind of steel rods you're going to use, what kind of cement you're going to use, what kind of other materials you're going to use, what shape you're going to give. Everything has already been tried and tested. You have the drawings, you have the stress analysis, everything has already been done. Then you deliver the bridge. So that is never, you're never going to do some experiment there. So therefore, that is engineering. That is some well-known thing being deployed. That is engineering. You're working on it and doing it. There may still be some modifications you may do on it, but that is the engineering part. The research on that would be, is there a new cement that can be used so that with less amount of cement you can make that bridge? Is there some other version of the steel rods that can be used so that with less steel you can build it? Is there a completely different shape you can give to the bridge so that for the kind of traffic that flows there, a much more elegant and light bridge can be built? So that is all in the research realm, right? So there is some differences, but you may not be able to draw a hard and fast line. So generally, if you're in the experimental side of things, it is nice if you're also a good engineer, because you may actually be doing some experimental setup, etc., where some of your engineering skills will help. So that's the general thing that I would say about overlap between engineering and research.
Okay, there is a question which is asked by Ashish related to full-time or part-time PhD. I think he'd asked the question earlier, and again it's repeated, so maybe we can take that up. Yeah. So I think this is a question that depends a lot on your own setting, in the sense what are your constraints, so in our institute, for example, we have a bulk of our PhD students are full-time. Given that during PhD you do require a deep dive into a topic, and also it's not a short-term commitment. So therefore, full-time PhD research is the norm. However, as I said, due to the constraints that are there, part-time PhD is also there. What you have to ensure is during part-time PhD, whichever job you are in, you are able to get a significant amount of time for your PhD. And if you are able to do this kind of an arrangement at your work, then doing part-time PhD is also possible. Many times, if you do part-time PhD and if you're not able to devote enough time, then it can stretch beyond 4 years, 6 years, and so on. And what we generally find is the efficiency of research work also comes down if you sort of work for 2 days and then not work for 5-6 days, or 2 weeks you don't come and think along those lines, because I think a lot of innovation and new ideas come if we are very focused on thinking about a problem, continuously brooding over it. So that's an essential element of doing research. So if you are very part-time should not imply that. If you are in a job where you can devote every day some time to your research, then you can attempt a part-time PhD also.
Okay, a couple of questions I want to take. One is a mundane one on the process that we're using here. So Chirag has a question on taking the course on the NPTEL site or the SWAYAM site, etc. So right now, the SWAYAM and NPTEL, etc. have come together. So we don't have, in principle, when you're doing an NPTEL course, you are actually doing an NPTEL SWAYAM course. So now our certificates will say NPTEL SWAYAM. Both will be there on that certificate. So you don't have to actually do this in both the portals. And the way we are evolving right now, for the NPTEL course, you only have to do it on the NPTEL portal. Some content will be available on the SWAYAM portal, but you can't take assignments, etc. there. Eventually, it will all become one portal. We are working towards that. You will have one portal, one single login, etc., through which you will come to the NPTEL site, and you will not see a variation. Presently, that is still a work in progress. So right now, there are separate portals. For all NPTEL courses, you should be coming to the NPTEL site, and it is sufficient that you come here and you get your or get all the activities done here. Okay, so that is the one point I wanted to tell you. And
should I take a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there were two related questions. One is asked by Matangi, I think, about what are the research opportunities for undergraduate student. And one of you earlier had asked also that how do I approach somebody for an internship? So I think the questions to these two is interrelated. So one of the things is, as an undergraduate, wherever you are within the institute itself, you can look for an opportunity during the semester itself, or maybe during the breaks, to do a research project. So that's something which is available. Many of your faculty members will be having projects. Many of you might another way of doing a project could be is to keep in touch with your fourth year seniors, and if some of them have done a very good job of a project and it is 90% complete, maybe you can take it up to say that in the break we will try to complete it and bring it 100%, because the fourth year students have already gone away because of they finished their graduation. So such projects will always be available, and even if you are in second year, it's a good thing because the project is reasonably near completion and you can start working on it and get experience. Some faculty members may have research projects, so therefore you can approach them and do some projects. Also within an institute, there is always requirement. Sometimes apps are required, which is within the institute for maybe making sure that canteens complaints are taken care of. So opportunities like this will be around you also. So you can, in fact, through your own initiative, pick up some projects like that. Talk to some of your faculty members and start initiatives. One other important feature is, of course, that internship in other organizations. It could be in industry, it could be in other universities, other institutes. So one idea is to actually say which areas you are interested in and then try to search for people working in that area. But the email that you write also should be able to convince the reader that you have done some specific reading, you have some specific interest, because generally a faculty member in another institute may be receiving 100, 200 requests for interns. So for them to respond to you will be very difficult. So, but if in your email it is indicated that you are very much interested in a specific area, you've already done some course related to it, or you've already done some project related to it, then it's easier for you to get internship in that. It's easy for you to attract attention of the faculty member who's reading your emails.
So actually, Matangi had another question. I think it's the same Matangi, says G Matangi here. Yeah. Can already existing traditions which have a scientific significance but just followed as tradition be taken as a field of research to explore the science aspect of it? So the short answer is yes, definitely you can do it. I will add some word of caution here. So what happens is, if you see it, in fact, these days, especially with all the social media that are available and a lot of WhatsApp kind of messages forwarded, etc. Something that was always there around us in the world is now more easily visible and shared across people. So the issue is that there are a lot of people who mix science and tradition or religion, etc. in a manner that is not what shall I say, scientifically defendable. Okay, so therefore, when you pick up some traditional area of life, this is tradition doesn't necessarily mean religion, but I'm just saying that we are treading into that ground, so we have to be a little bit cautious. So when some traditional thing is being taken, absolutely you can do research in it. There is no problem in it. You have to satisfy yourself and the audience that you are presenting that work to, that you have gone about it in a scientific way. So what normally happens in many traditional topics, as well as say some party traditional, party religious topic, there will be some general statement, and in many ways, whatever they are talking about in the next paragraph or so, we'll assume that that statement is accepted by everybody. So that is where the problem comes, because scientifically, the first statement may not be able to stand up to scientific scrutiny in terms of a proper procedure having been followed to arrive at that statement. So that's all it is. So when you have to satisfy yourself that the procedure that you follow, the process that you follow is cleanly defendable as a scientific process. As long as you do that, you can look at anything traditional, you can look at anything even semi-religious, etc., and then try to bring out either what is correct about it, or what is not correct about it, or what is verifiable about it, because the scientific process requires you to do the work in a verifiable way, so that if you do it and then you tell me the result, I should also be able to do it. So that's the whole idea. So that's the thing that I would like to highlight.
Yeah, so I think depending on the topic that you have chosen, what you need to be careful about is the methods that you are following are largely followed by other people, even though they are not working on the same topic that you are. Because there is always a commonality associated with working in engineering or science. And I think if we are using many concepts which are, let's say, not available in other people, then I think there is a question. Then you may need to question yourself whether you are borrowing too much from, like what Prathap said, is that they may be unverifiable, or it may be difficult to arrive at those using what is commonly known through scientific investigations. So more than the topic, I think what you need to be very aware of, what is the method you are using, what are the tools you are using.
Okay.
And they need to be scientific enough.
Yes.
The one other question which is related to this is, and I think it's a very important question these days, is how to identify a valid paper. In the sense, you are doing your literature search and you come across various papers, and then you find that the title seems to be interesting, and you start reading it, and then the question is whether is this paper a valid paper? In the sense, was it copied from somewhere else? Maybe the work was not done because things are available on internet easily. It's possible these days, unfortunately, that a paper that you get may either be work which is done by somebody else and copied. It could also be that the work is not following the scientific rigor the way we talked about, because methods are not being followed, tools are not being used appropriately. It could also be that maybe the work was not done, and the data was cooked up here and there, and or only 2 experiments were done, but data is presented for 6 experiments. So therefore, there are various ways in a paper need not be valid. And so it's a tricky question. There is no one sentence answer to this. One of the main things that we have to follow is look at consistency across the field. So just because you get one single paper and it claims something, you shouldn't base everything on that paper alone. You have to look at the consequence of similar finding in other set of papers. It's very likely that you'll see commonalities, and therefore you might be able to establish. The other thing is, being in a field for about, let's say, 6 months to a year, when you start reading, you will get to know that which are the journals which are better accepted, which are the journals which give some sort of more authoritative work. So I think when you follow some of those, then you will get a feel also for what is the scientific tools being used, what are the conclusions that can be drawn. And then you may be able to make a judgment about validity of a paper.
Yeah, so there were a couple of comments on the peer review assignment. So in fact, Prof.Abhijit is taking care of the peer review assignment. The one point I'll point out is that we are normally taking best 6 out of 8 assignments. So in fact, we are now using the peer review assignment as an extra assignment. So you will actually have best 6 out of 9. So you don't have to worry too much about the exact thing that happens in the peer review assignment in terms of what mark you get. The primary purpose we are doing the peer review assignment is to give you a flavor of what happens in real research publication process. So anytime you publish a paper or you try to publish a paper, it goes to people that you don't know. So that's exactly what this peer review assignment does. So it goes to people that you don't know, and you have no control about what they may think about your paper. You may have written it with some point of view, you may have written it with some idea, etc., and one person may say it is not at all acceptable. And I'm not saying that person is correct. It is that is the nature of how the publishing happens. All of us, when I send papers, many times the paper will come back from one reviewer saying, no, this is not related, this is not the way I would have done it, this is not this is not the correct approach to take, etc. So we have to accept that, and you cannot make logical arguments at that time about it, because that editor may make a decision that they don't want to take that paper because one reviewer said no, or one reviewer was lukewarm, other person said no. So you have to just accept that and move on to another journal. You may get a better journal even because of this process. So, but that's something that we want you to get a sense of or a flavor of. So that is what this peer review.
Yeah, and also as part of the peer review, one of the important features is that we must be able to answer the criticism that is raised about our work. So when the other person is raising certain amount of points, and maybe the viewpoints are different, then we should be able to argue saying that why whatever we have written is reasonable. And so that process is also followed in publication. So peer review basically implies that another person whom we don't know, but who is generally within the same research area, gives us comments. And then looking at those comments, we can write our own response. And through this process, we come up with, in the end, some consensus, saying that, okay, maybe there are 3-4 points on which we disagree, but there are 10-15 points on which we agree. And therefore, we have a more agreement than disagreement. Therefore, scientific sort of process has moved ahead. Through this paper, we have been able to say we know more than what we didn't know earlier. So that kind of a process we follow during peer review. So this assignment is intended for you to get an idea as to how this process is done.
Yeah. We have a question from Ramakrishnan Kumaravelu. So he is working in a mechanical core company, and he is planning to be a researcher or a professor. So he wants to know whether MTech or MS is the right way to take. IIT he mentions, but I don't think that's necessarily the point here. Generally, if you want to be a faculty, most places these days are increasingly expecting you to have a PhD. That in that sense, taking an MS and then a PhD is probably the right way for you to go. That's the short answer to your question.
Yeah, one question which is related to how does one write a review paper if you are new to the field. In our personal opinion, I think a review paper is written generally after some experience in the field, because review is trying to look at what is out there and what is known, and trying to give a gist of what is the current status. So in general, you may not be able to write an effective review paper if you are very new to the field. So I would suggest that you wait for a certain amount of expertise in that field and then think of a review paper.
Yeah, just to add what Abhijit said, I think if you're writing it for your own personal thing, then I think maybe you can go ahead and try it. But when you say review paper, as Abhijit was pointing out, that usually conveys that a journal is going to take that up as a review paper and publish it. So in fact, many journals, they will actually ask you to give a proposal saying, I want to do a review paper in this topic, and I'm going to do this review paper along with the following colleagues of mine, some three of us. We will have to submit our CV along with it, saying why we are the right people, because we have already published a lot of papers in that area, etc. Between the three of us, we have many publications in the area, and therefore we seem to know the various things that are happening in the area. Therefore, we are fit to write a review paper. So that is what a journal is expecting from you if you want to submit a review paper to them. So that is a much more involved process, and so as Abhijit pointed out, this necessarily means that you have already been publishing in the area, which means you have gained a lot of experience in the area. So for formal publication of a review paper, you should typically be an expert in the area, which needs you to be there for some time. For your own purpose, you are submitting a review paper in your class or something for some assignment or some sort. Then of course you just look at a bunch of papers. You may even look at another review paper which is already there in the field, learn some things from it, look up some of those references, and then make a shorter version of it or a gist of it for your representation.
Yeah, there is a question related to, I guess this pertains to experimental research, but is there any relevance of notebook in the digital era? So I think during research, it's very important to keep all the information that you are undertaking, experimental details, what were the conditions under which experiments were done, and what was the specific material system that was used. So all these, there's a very important to keep note of it, because this is months after months we will be doing work. And so generally a notebook is the best way, because it's right there wherever we are. And also, since it's a freehand handwriting, we can write and jot down various things. One could argue that an app may be there which will provide, but remember, we are doing research. So if we do survey, which is like very well defined, what is your phone number, what is your name, what is your Aadhaar number, then it's very easy to do it in an app form and get the information. So therefore, digital information in very well defined set of topics is easy to get. But in research, we are not sure. So therefore, to have a digital way of storing information can always become tricky. But in the end, what we do most of the time is we keep a notebook, which is very basic information and raw information, which is available to us anytime. We can flip and back and forth very easily. And from time to time, every month, we also try to compile it in form of a presentation or a report and Excel sheets and so on, so that we keep both. So it's a generally good idea to keep notebook as your very strong base with which you can always check. And it's a good idea to keep your data in the form of soft copies, in terms of reports, in terms of data files, and so on. So I think a combination is what you need in today's age.
Yeah. So to add to that, if you actually go and work in any of the foreign companies, etc., they are very particular that you keep maintain a book, a notebook. It will be a numbered with pages numbered. It won't be just some general notebook. So a lab notebook will typically have a thicker cover. It will be on hardbound notebook with the page number. So you're not supposed to tear pages from it. You're supposed to write on it, and then you write all your experiments. Every day you come, you put the date and the day's date, and you say today I'm doing this experiment, sample number such and such, and follow some process. So especially for experimental work, this is extremely useful. I'm sure even for theoretical work, this is very useful, because after even a few months of doing experiments, you'll have all sorts of samples, and you will easily lose track. Maybe the first 2-3 days, first 1 week, you will know that black sample was that, and this other half bottle is something else, and that bottle with the cap slightly broken is the third sample. After about 1 month, you will give up. You'll have so many bottles of samples there, you will have no idea what is what. So every sample you put, you should have a label on the sample with some sample number. So that sample number is a numbering process that you should adopt for your convenience. It could be a date plus a number. That will work very well, because if you see the date, you can go to the page where the date of that set of experiments is there. In your lab notebook, because you use the same date, you can go to that page. There you will have sample 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can figure out what that is. If it is that date and sample number 6, you can go to that sample number 6 and figure out what is that sample. So even like 2 months later, you remember that in your discussion in your group meeting, some comment is there saying, why not we try that composition, some new composition, and you remember that 1 month ago I actually tried that composition. Then you go look at the date, you find out 1 month ago on that particular date, sample number 6 was that composition. You will have all the results of it. So even when you plot your data, you put the file name with that sample number, so that you can easily track between the file name that is on your computer to a page in your book to the actual physical sample that is sitting there. This is extremely useful for you to keep track of things over the months that you do research, over the years that you do research. Second thing it is very important for is for any patent application, any IP application. You may not think it is very serious, but you may be working in a company where suddenly some new idea that you came up with is a very important patent. Okay, some very major patent. So then what will happen? You see in the news all the time, major companies are arguing with each other as to who violated whose patent. So all the time, for example, Apple will be having some, in the recent past, you have seen all these arguments between Apple and Samsung and so on which is patented, what is patented, who patented what, like that. That's just an example. You may find that in any field. So there, the notebook is a very critical aspect. A well-maintained notebook which is numbered, which can be provided as proof to a court, saying that on this date, the person in my company did the experiment, and this is the result that they got on that date. So that dated thing with the printout of your data stuck there, etc., is a really useful thing to have. So a hard copy is invaluable. So don't think that it is old-fashioned and today you can do everything in an app. The problem with the app is you can even manipulate things, so people are less, have less faith in simply seeing a computerized document, because in a computer you can cut and paste all sorts of stuff at any point in time. Even there you can do something forensically to figure out exactly what was done when. But still, this is a much easier way of defending your work. So therefore, it's very important.
Yeah, there was a question related to that many of the applications when you are applying for PhD programs, there's a requirement that you have to write a research plan. And the question is, how is it possible for an undergraduate student to write a research plan? So I think the purpose of this research plan is to gauge whether you are effectively able to talk about a topic and when you say a research plan, it should indicate some introductory remarks. There should be some motivation. Then should be some way, this is what I am going to do, this will be my objective. And then some few sentences saying, how will I go about doing this? So are you able to write a 1 page or 1.5 page document with a given idea? So it may not be that the faculty members who are assessing your application may not play as much emphasis on your ideas per se, but how you are putting the whole document together. Does it follow, is introduction motivation there? Is objective clear enough? The work that you are proposing to do, can it be useful to meet the objective? Because it may be sometime that I want to, let's say, I want to develop a new catalyst is the objective. But then when I mention the work, it is saying that I'm going to do some, take the existing catalyst and then do some trial. Then it's not going to lead to a new catalyst. So therefore, the work that is proposed is not really useful for the objective. So are you able to write all these sections properly in a 1.5 page? That is what is being assessed. So as an undergraduate student, you may not write a novel research plan, but you can write a comprehensive and what can be understood by others in terms of a clear research plan. And I think that's the skill that is being looked at. So by reading a little bit about the topic, you can you introduce and motivate? Can you say what may be one objective and how can one achieve those objectives? So this is what you should think of as a research plan document.
Okay, there are a couple of questions from Rahul. Rahul Dandriyal. I think, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but he asks about the difference between research and thesis, whether we can do free research in any institute, meaning he elaborates saying means we do what we want. So yes and no. I mean, so okay. So first question is about research and thesis. So research is the process. You're doing something. You're doing the whole analysis, etc. The thesis is sort of, you put it all together and you explain what it is that you accomplished through your research process. Maybe that's a little bit general answer, but that's roughly what it is. I mean, thesis is the putting it all together. You may have individual pieces. You may want to do some thought process which is deeper than just these individual pieces of information. That whole thing put together, written down, it then becomes your thesis. Now, free research, which is unbounded, is done. It is not that it is not done, but very few institutions do that. What they do is, for example, I think in olden days, I mean, maybe they still follow the tradition. In the US, they set up some labs called Bell Labs. Similarly, there were some other labs also set up, where what they would do is they give this privilege to some extremely accomplished researchers, so who have done very well in some field. They invite them and they say, here, we are giving you a salary. We give you all the money that you want to buy whatever equipment you want. And you have a clean slate. You decide what you want to work on, what you want to do. They'll only give some overall guidelines, saying, for example, I remember one of the labs had this guideline that all of you should have meetings once in every week or once in 2 weeks. That's all. No other rule. You have to meet once in 2 weeks, and you have to have some minutes of the meeting. You do whatever you want to do, but that process that you will meet once in 2 weeks and explain what you're doing to each other is all that is required. So you can work on something, somebody else can work on something else, and then they just allow you to do it. So it happens, but you have to understand that most places will not have this luxury. They will not give this luxury to everybody. So as few institutions will be set up this way, they will give this luxury, and they will typically pick the people who are doing best research or who have apparently presented themselves as accomplished researchers, and those people will be given this privilege.
And I think also adding, because he's asking, I think, whether in India. So in general, I think when we interact with faculty members from US especially, it seems like that institutes in India have more freedom because our funding and our many of the avenues for research are not as heavily tied down by the current government policy. And it's not all saying that only this area will be funded. So we don't have such directed research. So in general, when you join an institute in India, you will have quite a bit of, more freedom generally than you might have in an American university these days. Okay, so that's an average observation, but of course, depending on a specific topic, depending on a group that you join, depending on an area that you join, freedom can be more or less. So very hard to give a very generic answer to this.
Yeah, quantum dots is another question that you asked. That's, I think, very specific research area. So maybe I won't get into a lot, but it is there. It is happening in many of the IITs. It's happening in IIT Madras also. It happens.
Yeah. One of the question which was asked earlier, and I think it's probably very important, why replicate a research paper during research is the question. So I think maybe this came about because maybe in our discussion also during the course, we might have said that it's important in the early part of your career to validate some of the things that you are doing. And one way of validating is to sort of do some small amount of effort spend on such that you reproduce some results which are already known. So that's the main purpose of replicating the work, is basically getting confidence in your own expertise that you are able to do what others have done. Many times also, if it's a very novel result, it's a good idea to cross-check it. Because somebody else has reported it does not mean that maybe there were other issues which are important and they were overlooked. So therefore, when you find something new, when you find something very striking result, it's better to check it. When you are new into the field, it's better to check some of your own results with what is out there in the literature. In fact, many times you may not be able to, may not have to replicate what is there in other groups. Your own senior student, what has been done, you can try to replicate also. So that also gives you enough confidence to say that, I've been able to get what somebody else had also obtained. So I have enough skills now to start looking at new results.
Yeah, just to add to that, when you publish, especially let's say you got some interesting result, you say that, some new sample you have got is doing distinctly better than what everybody else has been doing. Let's say you're working on a battery and you say now we have a battery that will last 3 times longer than anybody else's battery out there. So how will somebody believe you? How will you believe yourself also? Best way is for you to test a standard battery also under the same conditions that in which you are testing your new battery, and show that your data for the standard battery matches the data that is already there in the public domain by various other people. So this means that there is nothing wrong with the way you have tested it, right? So sometimes it may just be that your instrument is showing some current, but actually the experiment is running 1/3 the current. And because it is running 1/3 the current, it is lasting 3 times as long. So it may be as a trivial error like that, right? So whereas if you now test the standard battery and it is not showing any issues, that shows that your experimental setup is correct, that you are taking your readings correctly, and that you, with great confidence, you can show that your data is correct. So that is why it is important for you to replicate some results and then share it, compare it with the literature.
Yeah, there was one question which is related to the course specifically. Will there be a peer assignment for data analysis? Because there is a peer assignment for literature review and grading. So I guess maybe partly it will depend on how you are. Right now, we have only given you a practice. A couple of weeks down the line, we will actually run the peer grade, and how you do on that will, I think, determine for our next set of courses. For this particular run, we are not going to have any assignment based on data analysis, peer grade assignment.
Yeah. So is it ethical to use government data for data analysis? So I don't know if I'm answering. So this is a question from Manoj here. I'm not sure if I'm answering it correctly or I'm understanding the question correctly. So there is nothing. First of all, once the government puts out data, as public domain data, you can do analysis on it. There's nothing that prevents you from doing analysis.
In fact, it's true for even any other data also which is available in the public domain. Yeah. See, somebody else's data which is published is for us to use. Only thing is we have to acknowledge where it comes from.
We have to acknowledge, and then to some degree our analysis etc. of it will depend on the quality of that data originally produced. So there you are depending on the institution or the published work etc. to have been a reliable work. So you have to select sort of whether you are selecting the data of the right kind of institute which has a good reputation etc. So little bit of homework you should do, but you can analyze. So let's say you're looking at traffic accidents across India. I mean, you're not going to go and collect the data sitting road by road and picking up what has happened on each road. So you're just going to look at data provided by states on what accidents are happening in their state, whatever is there, the national database for it. So you're going, that is all government published data only. So you have to take that data and work with it. So if it turns out that you see more two-wheelers of a certain kind having getting into accident, if that is the result that you are showing, then this is the data you're going to work with. If you're going to say that maybe four-wheeler is safer or a three-wheeler is safe, or maybe you're showing that three-wheeler is not as safe as people have thought it is, whatever it is, but this data is going to be public data. You can use it. There's no harm in it.
Yeah. And as part of even other research, generally we do use data which is others. So for example, if I'm doing a theory, I'm developing a theory, I might, it is largely based on one set of data that I know, and then I find out some other set of data also I would like to again test my theory. So I would, my theory will become stronger if multiple sets of data can be sort of shown to follow the theory.
Yeah.
So therefore I will be in search of others' data, and I may not do many of these experiments, but I can use the data as long as I acknowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the ethical part of it is only the
acknowledgement of it.
Yeah, acknowledgement of it.
And also you should have, see, because when the data is published, they will give under what circumstances the data was taken, and you should keep all of that in mind when you use it.
Yes.
So we should not misrepresent the data in the sense they have given data with some assumption. We try to say that no, it is valid for some other assumption also. So then we are manipulating the data. So we should use the data as they have given using the assumptions that they have said. Yeah. And if it's valid for our use, we should certainly use it with acknowledgement.
Yeah. So the ethical aspect there is only primarily acknowledgement. Maybe the other ethical aspect is about things like identity of the people involved, etc. Which may ideally the data itself should have put privacy clauses inside it, so that you don't, even if they're showing you say as for example this accident statistics that I'm talking of, as long as they're not talking of the names of the people involved, then it is probably fair enough to use that data. So even if by accident, by chance some names are there, it is good practice for you not to be using those names directly. So that is the ethical aspect of that part of it. So that's about that question. Rahul has a question on, is it advisable for UG student who wants to pursue career in research and education to start reading academic papers, literature review, etc.? Absolutely. The answer is absolutely yes, strongly yes. Please feel free to start reading a research paper as early as you can. There is no start date that you have to cross, no age limit that you have to cross before you start reading research papers. Even as a first year undergraduate student, even as a high school student, you can start reading it. Generally, the research paper will have a lot of technical terms and will assume some level of knowledge from the person. So a younger person who's still in in 12th standard or first year of college, etc., when they pick up the paper, they may face more difficulty in understanding what the paper is. So you read whatever you understand. If you understand, because especially in the introduction, conclusions, they would have tried to generalize things and present it in a more general form. And to that degree, you will be able to understand that. You will also get some idea that these kinds of techniques they're using, I don't know these techniques, but this is the kind of technique they're using. So later you'll say, okay, I will look up an article on that technique. If necessary, I will try to learn something. So that's absolutely fine. So at any age, you can read a research paper.
I think one of the questions was there that my own paper is used by some other international journals. If I understand the question correctly, I think this question is saying that if my own work that I have done, if I see that somebody else is exactly copied and put it, I think the first thing for us to do is to complain to that whichever journal you see it. What you should do is you should write to them with a copy of whatever your original contribution is, because many of the times to prevent these practices from happening at more regular intervals, we need to be able to alert people, saying that, look, such and such paper that you have published in your journal is actually a copy based on this work which was earlier. So whenever we spot such a thing, whether it's due to our own work or somebody else's work, it's a good idea to just write an email to the editor of that journal.
Yeah, so there is a question about doing PhD in an IIT without GATE qualifications, but without getting into too much detail there, the general idea there is, I think, at least in IIT Madras and probably true in many of the other IITs also, if you have a master's degree, then to my knowledge, GATE is not necessary. If you don't have a master's degree, GATE is necessary, but I think otherwise GATE is not necessary. So you may have other options by which you can join a PhD program. So that is something.
There was one question which was related to how does coursework help in PhD? And so I think we touched upon that earlier, that coursework gives you the basics which are required. And as Prathap was mentioning, even during undergraduate, when you start reading paper, you may not understand, and then therefore you need to learn the basics. And coursework during PhD basically helps you do that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've had a good session. A lot of nice questions.
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. First question.
Yeah, go for it.
This was question asked. I think one of the first ones. So maybe I thought it's best to answer that also. It said that how do I identify a sample size? I think it was for management studies. The question was asked, but I think it's an important question for various other research also. And today, of course, these days in India, there is election season. So for people who do poll prediction, again, sample size is very important. I'm sure when you hear it on TV news, they will say the sample size is so many thousands. And bigger the sample, of course, we tend to say that, oh, then the poll is more credible. So that's the basic point, that the larger the number of samples you have, actually it will be more credible. But at the same time, it's not always possible to have, because of the limitations that are there in terms of time, funding, also in terms of physically going so many places. So therefore, this is as large a sample as possible. And generally, there are statistical techniques which will be discussed during data analysis to say that what inferences can be drawn based on what is the, so we can estimate the confidence interval of the data, we can estimate, so all of that has to be done for you to get a good conclusion based on the sample size that you have.
Yeah, so I think we will wind up now. Yeah. We are still having some questions coming in, but what we will do is, please feel free to continue asking us questions on the discussion forum. We are answering as many as possible. Sometimes the questions are a bit too specific. Sometimes we answer the student directly or we post back to the discussion forum. So we will continue doing that. We will try our best to also arrange another live session maybe a month down the road. We're very happy that you could join us, and it's a good way to interact. We will aim for one more session later. So I think for today we will wind up. Thank you for joining us.
It's about 2 minutes.